Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Championship Leadership Podcast. I got Super Joe Pardo here from South Philadelphia. Appreciate you being here, man. Thank you.
What is up, Super Nate? How are you feeling today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing
What's
great,
good? What's
Nate.
good feel
Nate
like,
the
Nate?
Great, right? Yeah, huh?
You feeling great? You're feeling positive? Give
I
me an
am.
adjective
I
that's
am.
not good.
I'm feeling accomplished today. Like we were talking, I've
Woo!
I've
That's
gotten
good.
some
I
good
like
things
that.
done. So yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
that. Like that.
I love it. Let's kick this off with the question I like to ask in the beginning is name of the podcast, the Championship Leadership. What does that mean to you? What do you hear when you hear championship leadership?
So that to me means the people that aren't just talking it, they're doing it. They're showing other people how to do it. They're leading by example. Always got to be leading by example. And it's one of the things where like I'm one of those people that's like you don't have to swing the bat every single day, but when the chips are down, you gotta swing the bat. And when
Yeah.
people are watching you and people have their eyes on you, you have to be there and show up. And you might be tired and you might be functioning at like 40% capacity at that moment. And people see it and people understand it. Nobody's expecting you to be superhuman, but they're expecting you to at least do enough to make them feel inspired to want to jump in and help or do their part better.
Right.
So you got to be willing to just keep showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that my definition is probably falls right in line with that. So I agree. Like lead it to the highest
Woo!
example. Yeah, great work.
Nailed
You nailed it.
it.
Well, let's learn more about Super Joe Pardo. You know, somebody that has the name Super Joe Pardo. You know that he's an amazing man. So maybe tell us a little bit about your path and what's gotten you to where you are today.
Man, where do I begin? So I grew up in a family business in the truck parts industry in South Jersey. You earlier you said I was from South Philly. My family's from South Philly. I'm from South Jersey, which is like right.
Oh,
Like I
my
can see
bad.
the.
Yeah, I thought you
That's
said
all
that.
good. It's
Yeah,
all good.
yeah, yeah,
I can see the skyline right down the street from my house.
yeah, yeah.
So I grew up in this truck parts business, and I worked there from the age of 6 up until about 2000 or until 2014. April 2014, when I finally decided I had enough and I was ready to move on and do something else. The problem was I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. I got no degree. I mean, I have a huge background in IT and like website building. I've been building websites since 96 when I was 10 years old. And built, company websites just a few years later after that, like in, middle school, high school age. And, I fell in love with DJing. It was a DJ through the end of high school and through a number of years. And I went from being like working in the warehouse as a 6-year-old, working my way through the ranks. Ultimately became the director of operations at the truck parts company, which is the largest independently owned truck parts company on the East Coast at the time. And it was it's one of those things like when you stand at the top of the mountain and you're like, man, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a thing or like it's
Yeah.
not that big of a deal. Until you step off the mountain, turn around and be like, oh, darn it. That is a really massive organization that both my grandfather and my dad built from the ground up starting back in 1980, 1981
Yeah.
through a recession, no less. So,
Yeah.
it was a scary time for me to leave the company in 2014. It was not a well welcomed opportunity that I was taking for myself. I went back to school in 2013. I announced I was going to leave in 2014
Okay.
and started going back to school. Like I was like, all right, well, I should get the degree or something. I don't know. I started taking a
Right.
couple of classes and I quickly realized like this is going to take forever because I was just going for my associates. Like
Yeah.
this is taking 2 classes at a semester is going to take me like 8 years to get an associate's degree. And it's like, as it turned out, like I didn't, even the teachers I became friends with, because I was older than most of the people in the class at that point. The classes I was taking, the teachers are like, Joe, we're like, what are you really trying to get out of this? And I'm like, I don't know. I got to have a degree because like if I'm going to get a job or I don't know. I went to a bunch of networking events. I was like, maybe I want to get involved with sports. I'm a numbers guy, operations processes, like, evaluating people. It all kind of goes in it, like going back even to being a kid at 6 years old, I cried on my grandparents' floor. I told them, like, I don't want to take over the family business. I want to be a child psychologist to help other kids going through divorce like myself. And that was like, it was a big moment because my grandfather, who started the business, was like, hey, you don't have to do this. You can do whatever you want to do. And we're going to be proud of you as long as you, put it, give 100% of your effort to it. And that to me was like that was like life changing, because like all this monkey got off my back, right? But but it was still ended up getting into the family business, and so for me, like, I've always had this thing where it's like I really did want to be a child psychologist, but I didn't want to go to school for 10 years. It just wasn't. And ultimately, I've helped a lot of kids. I've spoken at lots of schools and kids events, and helping them, build out an entrepreneurial journey for themselves, like a pathway. And ultimately, like, I did it. I'm doing things in that same vein without having to be like the guy with the clipboard and writing the notes and all that stuff like that. That's just not really me anyway. But yeah, so I decided, like, all right, I'm going to leave. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then, like, things kind of took a turn for the worst in January of 2014. Like, I was supposed to be gone January 1st, but like, I still didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to go, like, continuing school. That was going well, and I was like, well, maybe I'll just stick it out, because like there was some things going on in the company that I was trying to, like, I wanted to help, but at the same time I still was trying to leave, and I wasn't sure. And it just got really toxic, because it was not, me and my dad were like button heads like every other day, and it was not a good time. And finally it came to a head April 2nd of 2014. We ended up in a fist fight after, like, everyone had just left, and then we ended up in an argument, ends in a fist fight. There's like holes in the wall, and it wasn't good. Was not a good time, man. Right. And so I left. I had to go take a test after that at school. Wow. Yeah. So fortunately, the teacher didn't show up, because like my eyes were all like red. Like, I'm crying. I was crying. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to be in this situation. Yeah. I didn't want to come with this. But sometimes, Nate, you find out, like, you have to do the thing that pushes you to over the edge. It's like you can't go back, right? It's the whole burn the boat mentality. And sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing it, right? Some people are like, I'm gonna burn the boats, I'm gonna go, but like sometimes it's a mental thing. It's a subconscious thing where you're just like, hey, I know if this happens, I know this is gonna be fine. In fact, I called it like right before my office mate left. I was like, there's gonna be a big fight here. And then he left, and then I got up, went to go leave. We ended up in an argument, ended the fight, and then I didn't go back for weeks. There was weeks before I walked back through those doors, and of course I was getting text messages from the employees and stuff, and like they're like, "What the heck is going on?" Like, we come back and there's like, holes in the wall, and like keyboard like flown, and it was like sprawled out over the ground. Like it wasn't. But the reason I tell people this story is because I want them to understand that sometimes you get into situations that you don't want to be in, and you don't mean to be in. It's you sometimes you have to realize what's going on around you, and you're too close to the situation to see it. And for me, like, I was definitely too close to the situation to like see all the problems. But then after I leave, but my dad and like other people would be like, so to go to my wife, who we've been married for 2 years at that point, we've been together for quite I don't know, 6 years or something like that at that point. And they're like, well, what, are you mad at Joe for leaving the job? Like, he left like $100 million company. Like, what, are you mad? And she's like, no, he's happy. He's not coming home and yelling at the top of his lungs about how annoyed he is because people just refuse to change, and he's not getting that support that he needed in order to make those changes. One of the famous things I was screaming about was like, numbers don't lie. Like, I took the inventory levels from, and this falls right into the leadership, right? I took the inventory levels from in 2012, we were sitting, I think, with just about $6 million in inventory, when really we should have been about $2.5 to $3 million in inventory, with a fluctuating month after month. It goes up, goes down, depends on what part of the month you're in. And so I, there was an algorithm in our computer system, but it was not really good, wasn't really coherent. And I worked on it with the computer company like day in and day out. And we were able to take our inventory down to $3 million in just over a year. And that wasn't just by doing returns. That was just by cycling the inventory, because we had a hub and spoke system, right? So we had the main warehouse and we had all the stores. So we were sending out inventory. So we had them ship inventory back, because like that had not been done in a long time. My grandfather, my grandfather, for all of his awesomeness, he didn't believe in the idea of returning things. He's like, well, if I buy this chapstick at 60 cents and it sits on my shelf for 3 years, but now if I go to buy it, it's like $1.40. And I sell it now, and I sell it at the price, the price markup from the $1.40 instead of the 60 cents. I made money. Well, the thing is and I wrote about this in my first book, everything pays rent. Necessity or entertainment value. And in the case of this, like if you're stocking a bunch of these and you're not selling them, then you're taking up valuable space that you could be stocking the stuff that you are selling on, and the money to do so. So we returned as much as we possibly could, because we had so many back years of non-returns. So we were able to do it though. But that 2012 to 2014, it completely exhausted me. When you're working with people that have been there as long as you've been alive, right? And you're 22, 23, 24, 25 years old, and you're like, hey, numbers don't lie. And like, we're going to build this system out so that you guys can get the right inventory when you need it, rather than just being like, I got to hold 10 of these because it makes me feel good, because that customer, he's coming back for it. And you look at the numbers, like he hasn't bought it in 3 years. Nobody's bought it in 3 years. And you're holding 10 of them when we can use them in other stores and just sell them off like that. Like that's a big deal. It adds up very quickly. So, I learned, I took my lumps and I learned a lot of lessons about leadership in those 2 years, specifically in those 2. I mean, I learned a lot prior to that, but those 2 years specifically, because there was so much pushback. And then, Nate, the funny thing is hindsight's 2020, because what ended up happening was a year after I left the company, we made all the changes. And I eventually baked in a way for the guys, the managers, to be able to, okay, I have 10 of them. I know a guy that's going to buy them eventually. He comes in, and when I got to have him when he comes, but I haven't sold it in 3 years. I'm like, fine, keep 2 of them. Send me 8. I'll take 8. Yeah, I'll take 6 or 5, 7. Give me 7 of them. We'll redistribute them. You hold on to the 3. And when you sell them, good for you. You know what I mean? Like that's fine. And having that flexibility enabled people to feel a little more confident. But turns out, when a year after I left, my dad sold the business to the largest multi-billion-dollar conglomerate of truck parts out there. And what do? Well, they do the same exact thing, but they have much harder, like stringent. You can't just order this. You can't just do this. And this is the way it is. So like with me, they had the opportunity to be like, okay, I'll keep 3 of them. No big deal. Have a great day. Here's your 7. With them, it's like, no. We need it all back. Yeah. We need it back yesterday. Yeah. And it's very stringent what power that they have. And as managers under us, they had a lot of power. They had a lot to say. And even though I was trying to push, numbers and utilizing the computer, because like the computer knows that you sold it last week. You might think that it was last week, but it was a year ago. You know what I mean? It was 48 months ago. Like, what are you going to do? Like, it feels like yesterday though. So, but it's those lessons that I took that, and the validation after the fact of like, hell, how about that? Like a year later, I found out like I was doing it as good, if not better, from a team perspective than the multi-billion-dollar company. So I don't know. But yeah. So ultimately, with me leaving, I found podcasting. I mean, I've been listening to Disney. I'm a huge Disney head, which my background is. I'm redoing my garage right now. So really? Into a studio. Yeah. So it was one of my 2 garages, turning it into a studio. So I don't have any Disney paraphernalia on the back, behind me just yet, but we're gonna get there.
I just recorded a podcast yesterday with a guy that was with Disney for many years. He was a VP of with the Kingdom,
Yeah, you're talking about Dan
Dan
Cockrell.
Cockrell.
Yep,
You got it.
good
Yeah, yeah,
friend of mine.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
He's a great guy. His dad's great too. Lee is awesome. He wrote the foreword to my 4th book.
Oh, awesome. No
Sales
way.
Won't Save Your
Wow.
Business. Yeah.
That's crazy. Small world.
Yeah. Dan's really good people. And so is, Lee and Dan. They're really, really great people.
Yeah. Well, where were you going with that? So the podcasting, Disney, and
yeah. So like in 2004, 5, I think like 506, I started listening to a Disney podcast. And so my friends were all in the pod. Like, again, I had a tech background. A lot of my friends are in tech. And so they, I knew about podcasting, was listening to one specific podcast. And, and I was told I should have a podcast like back in 2011, 2010. My friend Michelle was like, oh, you should totally have a Disney podcast. And I was like, I don't want to talk about this. I get bored. Like, I love Disney World. I love Disney as a company and all that. But I would totally get bored. It just would not be for, I don't live in Florida or California. Right. So the idea of me having a podcast was like, okay, that's cool. I released a DJ album right around the same time that I left the company in 2014. And with that, I was doing a bunch of Disney podcast interviews, like to promote the album. We were raising money for Give Kids the World. It's a charity organization down in Orlando. And we, I was able to raise a bunch of money and had fun. I was doing all these podcast interviews, and I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool. So I'm on a flight to Disney World with a friend of mine to run a race. I do a lot of running. Yeah. And he's like, oh, well, have you heard of this show called like Entrepreneur on Fire? And I was like, nah, I haven't heard of that. And this is in early 2014. So I think the show had just started in like 2013 or something like that. And I was like, oh, what do they do? And he's like, oh, they interview entrepreneurs. Like, you should totally listen to that. You'll love it. And I'm like, I mean, I never thought about a podcast as an interview thing. Like, I always, to me, like, I was just trying to get on roundtable discussions about Disney. So I was like, oh, well, I was like, I know a lot of people in business. Like, I could totally do that. But then I was like, I know a lot more people living their dreams. So I wrote down like 100 names on my phone and came up with the name right there on the plane. So as soon as the plane landed, I registered a domain name, Twitter handle, and Facebook page before we got to the rental car. Reached out to my boy, Al Kessel. He was like, hey, I was like, hey, he had just interviewed me on his show. And I was like, hey, I need help getting a couple, like, I don't know the WordPress plugin. Like, how do I host the feed? That kind of stuff. 20 minutes on the phone. Like, we were good. He was my first episode, and he was on Mr. Voice for pretty much the whole life of my show. In fact, when we won Business Podcast of the Year, I sent him a trophy, one of the trophies.
That's awesome.
For the show. Yeah. So he was my episode number 1. He's been on the episode, almost every episode as Mr. Voice there. And yeah, so I'm really thankful for Al. And so 2 weeks later, I had my first episode, and then I went from 1 episode to 3 episodes a week. And then I was starting to hit like iTunes new and noteworthy. I was like, I got to capitalize on this. So I started going 5 episodes a week. So I had this huge backlog because I was just interviewing literally everyone I could get to, talk about like a story. And ultimately what I found out was like, I was doing the Dreamers podcast for me. Right? This was for me because I still didn't know what the heck I wanted to do with my life. I was only 1 month removed, a little over a month removed from leaving the company that I was supposed to, be the heir to take over. And I still didn't know what I wanted. Maybe about a month or so later into the show, I realized like, okay, I'm going to write some books. I'm going to get speaking engagements. Like, I'm going to make all this work. And of course, I told people I know and care about, and they're like, what? Like that'll never work. That's terrible. That's crazy. That's not a great idea. And I'm like, oh, well, well, there's other people doing it. So it's not like it's so foreign, it's foreign to you because you've never heard of it. Like a car would sound pretty foreign to anybody who's never heard of a car before if they've only heard a carriage and a horse. Yeah. So I put together, this podcast and a few months later in like December 2014, I put together what was the MidAtlantic Podcast Conference, which now is called the Independent Podcast Conference, ICON for short. And we've held 5 in-person events annually. We've had people from literally all over the world come. That's been an awesome journey. We changed it to Independent Podcast Conference from MidAtlantic, and the growth has been since September has been astronomical. We went from having like 400 people on our Facebook group, or almost 1450 now.
Wow.
And that's in September. So
Yeah.
it's exponentially grown. We're doing virtual conferences now. I'm still debating if I'm going to have a in-person event in September. It's at the end of September. I don't know if it's going to work out or not, but yeah. So so all these things have going on. I've, started speaking and started getting, I started writing books. I wrote 4 books in 5 years. And it's been so much fun working with business owners. So one of the things I did, like right after I left, I did start coaching a couple of clients on their small business, and it was good. It was great. And I was also building websites for people, because I just was like, I got to do what I know what to do.
Yeah,
right. Like I don't really want to build websites. It's not really what I want to do. Like I know how to do it. I do it for myself. I do it for a couple of friends here and there, but it's not like a business that I want to run. And I just did it I got the bill, got the bills paid, and was able to keep, I helped my wife was a teacher, so her health insurance was taken care of, at the very least. And I was able to make the bills work and make it all, we I don't know how we survived some of those months, because I was under a lot of stress in a lot of months.
Yeah.
But we, did it. We're here. We made it through.
I love it.
It's still on the journey. It's not over yet, for sure.
I definitely heard of the MidAtlantic conference. I didn't know that you'd swapped the names.
I did, yeah, because huge shout out to my boy Eric Hunley of Unstructured Podcast. You should go definitely go. He's doing some incredible interviews over there. But yeah, he was like, Joe, you gotta hammer this independent thing. Gotta hammer it. And like 2 weeks prior to the show, 2 weeks prior to everyone coming down to Atlantic City, New Jersey usually we've been just outside of Philadelphia. This year I was like, 5th anniversary. We're going to go big. We're going to celebrate. It's going to be incredible. Right. And I'm like, all right, so we're going to go to Atlantic City. And I was like, you know what, Eric, what if we change the name of MapCon? Everybody loves MapCon. Everybody loves what it stands for, what people come to it. But every year, like I get emails like, is this for me? Can I come to this? I live in Seattle. I live in, California. And I'm like, yes, of course. Like it's just where it's held. It's not a big deal. And he's like, let's do it. Like you should totally do it. Like, let's make it happen. So with 2 weeks prior to the conference, I spin up and like change the names, and make like a whole talk, decide I'm going to give this talk explaining like the history and everything leading up to the name change. And some people are like, whoa, Joe, like, what are you doing? You're changing everything. And I was like, pause. No, I'm not. I just want to change the name. And like I said, literally overnight, we went from a pretty stagnant group outside of when we were doing the event in September, leading up to the event, a month after the event, it slows down, to every day there's like 3 to 5 people joining the group. Awesome. So yeah, so because they resonate with what it stands for, the name, like I guess the logo, like it all just kind of works together. It's incredible.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, the first I'd heard about that, Scott Mulvaney, I believe.
Scott, love Scott, big time icon.
So I know I remember seeing him posting a few videos. He must have been at the conference or something like that.
He's been at most of them.
I probably had the same thought, like MidAtlantic, I wonder who that's for, right? Mm-hmm. So that's interesting with the name change, and doesn't surprise me, the growth there. What's a big vision for you, Super Joe, moving forward?
Well, so I've always since I've started this journey, I have stretched myself out, if you will, with too many projects, too many little side businesses that I've spun up, whether it's with my wife or myself or, different thoughts and things of that nature. And in the last like 6 months or so, I decided, well, actually leading up to MapCon, because at the MidAtlantic Podcast Conference event, at the end, I admitted, I'm like, the last like 3 years, I pretty much have coasted on, like, we've grown year over year, but not an exponential. It's like a 20%, 25% growth.
Yeah.
I really want to sit down and actually take this seriously now, and that's part of the name change is taking it seriously. So, gonna really go hard for more than, like, it used to be like, 3 months, 4 months in advance, 5 months in advance. I would really ramp up what I was doing, my efforts to getting the conference ready. And now I really want to take that to the next level. So I've simplified my my model down to just really two businesses. This is the Super Joe Pardo business, which is business coaching, consulting, strategist, pretty much for optimizing processes in your business, for specifically for small businesses to medium-sized businesses. As well as, like, speaking and any kind of book writing. Although I wrote 4 books in 5 years. I'm kind of want to kind of hit pause on that a little bit.
Absolutely.
I mean, have you written a book, Nate?
I've written 3. Yeah.
It's a lot of work, ain't it? Like, yeah.
Sure.
It's a heck of a lot of work. So
especially 4 and 5 years. That's
well, 3. So 3 of them happened very, very quickly. Like, my first book took 3 months. Second book took 2 months. Third book took 10 days. Yeah. Well, it's like a different kind of book. And then my fourth book is a business book. It's a more of a traditional book. That took close to 2 years, because I kind of I did little bits and pieces over time, rather than just like, I'm just diving in and hammering it out.
Right.
So working with people, and then I'm also working on the TV show, which I don't know if you got to see the trailer for The Top with Super Joe Pardo.
No, I haven't.
Oh, you haven't?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So a year ago I was contacted by a TV network that was like, hey, we want you to, do a TV show. Like, if this could really be a good fit for you. So I'm like, oh, cool. Like, let's make it happen. So we shot the pilot, and it's available on YouTube to watch right now. But then I spent a lot of time working on getting sponsors and making those relationships. And it didn't all work out. It didn't all come into fruition. Yeah. And then I was like, oh no, it's like July and the conference is in 2 months, and I have like a deluge of things I need to do.
Yeah.
Not cool. Right. So I put the show on pause, and then I was planning on ramping it back up. I had a couple in March I was supposed to shoot, and that got postponed. So that's on the board. The podcast falls under that, the Super Joe Pardo show. And yeah, so like that's the Super Joe Pardo like umbrella. And then there's the Indie Pod umbrella, right? And growing that. And I really, really, really am putting a ton of effort, probably more effort in that than the Super Joe Pardo umbrella right now, because like people need it, right? Yeah. Like, they're sitting, most people are sitting at home. They're looking for stuff. That's why we're doing these virtual conferences. This will be my 5th virtual conference since the first one was March 30th or 26th or something like that. So like, since the end of March, I've done 5 of these things. Yeah. And they're just so much fun. They're 8 hours, 6 hours long. And people hang in there all day. We have like, consistent viewership, like 30, 40, 50, 60 people watching the entire day. It's crazy. It blows my mind. Like,
yeah, it is. Yeah.
that it's because it's not like 60 people watched a 2-minute video. It's like 60 people watched like 6 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And it's not just me. Like, I have speakers and stuff like that come on. They all bring their, the thing. I'm just hosting it through.
Yep.
Just hosting it throughout the day. So it's just a lot of fun. And it's like the growth is there. So I'm like, all right, I need to really continue to pour more and more time. So I'm looking at like how I can create maybe even a daily content, schedule based around it. Cause like right now I'm like, I have the time to do it, though. I did spend a lot of time getting what you see behind me all together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cause when you're doing it yourself with the help of one friend, running electricity, putting drywall up all over, insulation up, and carpet and all that, and you're getting it all, like, you get it all done. I mean, it feels awesome, and like it's just a great accomplishment feeling.
Yeah, definitely. Where did that come from? The creating originally MidAtlantic PodCon and now independent?
Yeah.
podcasters?
So
Where'd that come
I
from?
so I grew like in my family's business, we would do like an annual what's it called, a customer appreciation night kind of thing, where we'd have all the vendors that we deal with come and they'd set up booths, and then you'd walk through the booths and then get to a free buffet, like a high-end buffet with an open bar, and we'd have like 1,000 people come through in about 6 hours. It was really great, like, 'cause it's all old friends and like, I
Yeah.
haven't seen you in a year,
Yeah,
and like
right.
all this stuff. So it was a really cool experience. So growing up, like, I'm running around like grabbing all the pens and the free gibbies
Yeah.
off the tables as a kid. And so I grew up going to those, and I don't know, I always felt like in love with bringing people together and having a great time and creating an experience for people. Even like in my house, like, I mean, you see like the arcade games are behind me, right? Like there's
Yeah.
another one over here on the side that
That's
I
great.
don't have an easy way to show you at the moment,
Yeah.
but it's a shuffle alley on the side from 1969 that my
Nice.
grandfather bought in 1980.
Oh,
And
wow.
now it's in my garage. So, or my studio. I got to change the vernacular.
Yeah.
The vernacular. So, it's one of those things where you're just trying to, I just love bringing people together. So I went to an event, a Disney event, of course, because like everything has that Disney connection.
Right.
I went to a Disney event that the podcast I listened to, they put on every year. And when I was down there, it turned out that there was a podcast conference being put on by one of my Disney podcasting peoples, and Jared Easley, who eventually went on to co-found Podcast Movement. So I went to this thing, and I met a bunch of great people. I'm still friends with pretty much all of them, and they and I just like cause I come home back from Florida. My wife didn't. I was solo on that trip. My wife stayed home. So I come back, and I'm sitting there watching Peyton Manning play like one of his like handful of last games, I guess, in 2014. I think that was around the time he was.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Broncos,
Broncos. Yep. Denver
Yeah.
Broncos.
So watching him, and it's Sunday Night Football, and then I'm like, I wonder if there's like a Philly podcast group or something like that. So I Google, and like there's the Philly Podcasters Society. I was like, okay, let me go bigger than that. So I was like, let's talk Mid-Atlantic, and like bring all the Mid-Atlantic states together. And we held so I started with the Facebook group, and then in I think like March, we held a meetup in Bryant Park up in New York City, right outside of Times Square.
Okay.
And we had like 15 people show up. It was fun. It was a good time. And I was like, all right, we're doing this. We're gonna have our first event in September. It's like the first weekend after Labor Day weekend, or more. After Labor Day weekend, and we're gonna have it. So I got this. I held it at a school gymnasium at a local school here in Westville, New Jersey. And the reason I got it was because of my podcast. One of the kids that went to the middle school, he was on MasterChef Junior. So in season 3, I believe, or two or three. And anyway, I went there. I interviewed him at a watch party that they had, and then I became friends with like the principal. Quickly became friends with the marketing director, who I'm still close friends with. And I was like, hey, well, what if they were like, we really want you to like teach a podcasting class here? And I was like, well, I've never taught kids before, but all right, let's do it. So we did it, and in exchange, they gave me the school gymnasium, which would have been like $1,000 buy-in or so. Which turns out it would have been cheaper had I had just gone to the hotel that we ended up having the following year at. But I got this cool experience of like teaching a class of like 15 kids how to podcast. Yeah. They put a podcast together. They recorded like 3 or 4 episodes. They built their own WordPress website. They did all these things within 10 weeks. It was awesome, and I got really connected with them. So it was. It's definitely a very fond memory of mine. It's a weird memory too, because it's not something that like you would normally get to do, but because it was a Catholic school, there was more leniency in like who they let in and what they do and all that. So so it was like, okay, cool. Like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do it. So we did it. And we held the event. We had like 30, 40 people show up. The funny thing was that the thing that stands out to me more so than the event itself, because the event went awesome, the talks were great, but the after party that we had at the house, that was because 10 of like the 35 or 40 people that came stayed at our house. So
No way.
I went and bought air mattresses, and people were just sprawled out like all over the house. And because we had people, so it's called MidAtlantic Podcast Conference, right? So you would think like, oh, Joe must have got mostly people in the local area. No, I got people from Florida, 4 people from Georgia, 2 people from Ohio, including the Dave Jackson, Brent Basham of Poddit.net. He used to be Digital Dads. He flew up from Georgia. 2 people drove from Georgia, Connecticut. Like we were East Coast, man. This was an East Coast event. And then the second year we had people like Mark Gasquith came, and people from like Rob Greenlee came. So we had people from like Seattle to the UK. So now we were like all coast. We had Annette Bone come from California.
International.
Yeah, we were international in the second year. Like, how cool is that? And this is something called awesome. MidAtlantic. So, like, despite naming it the wrong thing out of the gate and hanging on to it, because like, oh, people love MapCon. People talk about their MapCon family. Like, it ultimately didn't matter. Ultimately didn't matter. But in the moment, it mattered. It mattered a lot to me. People having a connection to a brand, and it was sad. Like, people were sad, but now people are, people didn't like the shortening to Icon. They're like, oh, I'm just going to call it Indie PodCon. But now as time is going on, I hear more people saying Icon. because I'm like, it just makes sense. The Indie Pod, one word, and then Con, like.
I like it, Icon. I love it.
Yeah, right. So we had the Icon family. They, and I call all of them the Icons. That's why I called Scott Mulvaney an icon. That's Brett Bashman's an icon. Like, it just feels right. And when it feels right, it makes you feel better, and it makes the people around you that you surround yourself with feel better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. I gotta get to Icon now. I'm stoked. I'm excited whenever that happens.
Yeah, we gotta have you, man. I have a friend that lives out near you, because I actually have a shirt, because you said you live outside of Minneapolis, right?
Yeah, south. About an hour south. Yep.
I have a shirt. If I would have known, I would have wore the shirt. It says soda and then pop, and it's got like because our friend brought it. Shout out to KK.
Debate
for bringing it.
These parts, yes, for sure. What team are you on, soda or pop?
I mean, I say soda here, but I don't actually drink soda anymore. So
yeah.
Doesn't matter as much to me.
Well, I appreciate you being here today, and I want to respect the time. I do want to wrap up with a final question. If there's one or two things, maybe, because I do have a lot of folks, entrepreneurs, business owners, but also, they're interested in podcasting, or they have a podcast themselves. What you give us whatever you want. It could be a life lesson too. One or two things that if they implemented today, would help them move their life forward today.
Yeah. So number one, don't ask how you make money. Ask how you get good. That's, shout out to Dave Jackson. He's done many of MapCon talks, now Icon talks about that. You have to put in the reps. Have to keep just keep. If you're doing an interview show, keep interviewing. Like literally, I just yesterday was just talking with Andy Wong of Inspired Money. We were on the Indie Podcast, which we got to get you on there, Nate. You got to be a guest on there.
Yeah.
And we're talking about like our first 10 episodes on that show, and how like almost I think 9 out of the 10 on his end were friends, and all of mine. My first 19 episodes were out of 20 were all friends, except for I think 2 of them weren't, or maybe 1 or 2 of them weren't really friends, but they became friends afterwards. And that's the power of having an interview show. Like, I didn't have a network of people outside of the trucking world and in the IT world, because I was in the LAN parties and playing computer games. So I got into, those people. So I got those kind of networks, but I hate computers. I know how they work, and I use them all day, every day. And then I'm really proficient at helping other people with them, but I hate them because they never work for other people the way they work for me. So like, that's one of the reasons I didn't start an IT business because my dad was like, oh, you should just start an IT business. You could help people with their computers. And I was like, no, because I don't want a phone call at 2 a.m. about how the program that works every other time all of a sudden doesn't work. And it's like, I'm not the programmer. I'd rather be a programmer. And I did some schooling back in high school for that. But so it's You got to put in the reps to get great at what you do. Build that network. It's going to help you do that. People are going to help, you along the way. They're going to get you other guests. They're going to open up other doors.
Yep.
If you're more worried about the money, it's a tough sell, because you gotta market so much harder to make up for the fact that you have a crap show than to just get great at it and then be like, hey, listen to this, and like, bam, like people are not only listening to it, but they're telling other people about it. That's how I have international listeners. It's not because I'm marketing to an international audience. It's because I've had guests that live in those countries that I don't live in on that show, and then they're like, wow, like you got, like, they're telling their friends about how awesome of an experience that they've had. So that's number one. Put in the reps as much as you possibly can. And from a money standpoint, if the number one thing I can say about money is answer the 5 basic questions. I think there's a term for that. The journalistic 5 basic questions. I don't know. There's probably an actual term that I'm totally butchering. But do you know what those 5 questions are, Nate?
Yeah, my thought would go to like who, what, how, when, why.
Got it, right? Put that down on a piece of paper. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. And then it was just the 5 W's, right? I think it's the 5 W's plus an H in there.
Yeah.
But
right.
put down those 5 W's and just start to fill out, like, who are you making this for? Is it for you? That's awesome. Like, do that. But just know that it might be hard for other people to figure out what it is that you're trying to do and come on that journey with you. So answer those 5 questions for who you're trying to listen, trying to get to listen to it, and figure out the format and all that. But and don't be afraid to experiment, because like I've changed my format on my show many of times. I've done other shows. I did a show called Birth, Nate, where leading up to my first baby, me and my wife did a show together for like 33 episodes, 35 episodes, like one each week. And we like had conversations with our parents and our grandparents, and I interweaved all that into like a documentary style thing. Didn't make me a cent, but you know what? I have a keepsake, and I learned so much about like asking more questions and putting things together that ultimately helped me lead down the path of like shooting my own TV show. I wanted to shoot, I wanted to do a daily business lesson video every single day. So what I do, I only did it for 100 days, but I put together 110-minute videos that every single day I was doing a daily business video out of life. So it was a vlog. So I'm holding my vlog camera, which I have right here. I'm holding my vlog camera and I'm talking into it about, and relating to where I'm at, what I'm doing, what I see, to back to business. And I did it for 100 days. Now it took a lot of time in editing but the thing is, I got faster at editing. I got faster at telling a story. I got faster at diagnosing what's the important pieces here that I can cut out and speed it up and condense things down that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. If I was just sat on the sideline and be like, well, I'd like to shoot some video. I bought this expensive rig,
Yeah.
Gotta do it. Gotta put in the reps, do a bunch of it, and you'll get faster at it and optimize that process and then take it to the next level.
Yeah. Perfect. I appreciate that. That's definitely some gold. If you're listening, which of course you are, you listening right now.
Heck yeah, you're listening.
But
you get a ding for listening.
Yeah. Good job listening. Hopefully you're listening and not trying to do 20 other things. But I appreciate you being here. And what are some ways that they can find out about you and Super Joe and your podcast and everything else that you got going on?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Super Nate, for having me on. I greatly appreciate it. I think it's a wonderful topic that you're talking and bringing to light. And obviously you're getting great guests other than just this guy. That's right. Talking with people like Dan Cockrell, like that's high level stuff there, man. So keep it up.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. You can get all of my stuff at Super Joe Pardo, PARDO.com. Or you can go over to Indie, INDIE, pod, POD, CON.com and get everything about the conference. In fact, I don't know when this episode is going live, but this Saturday we're doing a virtual conference. We're doing one pretty much every 2 weeks. So go to indiepodcon.com/virtual. So if you missed this one, which is all about podcasting the video, maybe you'll make the next one. And yeah, and if you don't, the replays are available in the indiepoduniversity.com, which for a small monthly fee of like $10, you can get access to 100+ hours of video there.
Awesome. Appreciate it. We'll get that
Thank
linked
you.
up, of course. And yeah, just thank you so much, man, for being here. It's been great.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Have a good day.
You too.